Yeah, so you go first.
My name is Lisa Schultz.
And you were
Go.
born.
Oh,
I don't need to know that.
Okay. I'm Wyatt Schultz. So,
Wyatt,
yeah,
how old are you?
10 years old.
And Wyatt, how long have you had CBS?
Uh, about 1 to 2 weeks after my second birthday.
so
Okay.
8 years. 8 years?
8 years. And is
I,
that when your CBS started, or was that when you were diagnosed?
I think that's probably when it started, but
Yeah, so Wyatt had his first episode when he was 2, but it took until he was 5 to get a diagnosis. And we had spent 3 years going to multiple doctors in Washington, D.C. It's probably the best doctors I've seen before we got a diagnosis.
And Wyatt, can you describe a typical episode for you?
You can, yeah, that means what happens when you have.
Yeah,
yeah.
what happens when you, sorry, I should maybe phrase that differently. What happens when you get sick?
So basically, I get abdominal pain that's really bad, and sometimes it's so bad that I can't watch TV, play video games, or anything. I just want to lay in bed. But when I wake up the next day, it's usually fine.
It's usually fine. And do you only have abdominal pain, or do you have other symptoms when you're sick?
I also throw up a lot.
And do you just feel better on your own, or do you usually have to take medication to feel better?
I usually feel better after I just wake up. Yeah, in the morning.
Okay. Yeah. Wyatt's episodes are very similar. They've always been kind of textbook classical symptoms, which is he has some stomach pain early on in the morning, and he says his stomach hurts, and then he turns completely pale and starts throwing up multiple times, unable to stop. And then he falls asleep. And usually by like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, he wakes up and everything's fine. So we go from completely pale and in a lot of pain and a lot of throw up. And then we wake up, and after we wake up, we're great. But recently he has started taking abortive meds that seem to have really helped.
Oh, that's great. Um, yeah, and it sounds like he's one of those people that just a lot of times people describe it as a light switch effect, where all of a sudden they just feel better, like you're turning on or off a light switch.
Absolutely. Which was why it was so strange to me for so many years before I got my diagnosis, before he
Hmm.
got his diagnosis.
And what were there other things that they were blaming the vomiting and these episodes on, like other things they diagnosed him with before CBS?
Oh, yes. For 3 years, they told me he had constipation. So that I should treat with Miralax and multiple times a day and try to get him to go to the bathroom. So we spent the majority of 3 years trying to get him to go to the bathroom every day. And it was really stressful because that's what we thought the trigger was.
Yeah, I can imagine that causing some stress.
Yeah, we actually have only had one hospital visit, and it was the time that he got diagnosed. Because we went to the hospital, it was kind of atypical where he was throwing up so much and he wouldn't stop, and I just thought he's going to die. So I raced to the hospital with him and was just uncontrollably crying, and they gave him some abort meds, I guess, that they give people who are throwing up and they want them to stop. And I remember the nurses saying, "This is the first time we've ever seen someone." And they said, "This is the first time we've ever seen a kid that hasn't stopped throwing up after we've given him the meds." And so they asked me a few more questions, and they said, you need to get a patient advocate, you need to get a new doctor, and you need to get him seen. And they did an x-ray and it showed that he wasn't constipated. So that was how it really led us to his diagnosis. That happened when you were 5.
Well, and that's so great that the ER led you that way, because I feel like a lot of people leave the ER like just nobody can figure it out, or they just tell them, oh, you have the stomach bug or whatever. So that's really great that you that they kind of helped you get down the right path.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And how often are your episodes usually, Wyatt?
How long?
How often? Like every couple weeks, once a month?
Probably about like once per every month and a half.
Wyatt,
And then there was one time where I had it for like 2 weeks straight. It went away, and then 1 hour after I woke up, it just kept coming back.
Yeah, so Wyatt went through he had it probably once every 3 months. So again, it was calendar. It was once every 3 months until we saw Dr. Bowles, Richard Bowles, and we got on some better meds for him. And then he actually did not have an episode for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we've gone 2 years, and then this year after COVID, and Wyatt came home and it was a little stressful for school, doing online school. He had his first abdominal migraine. So it lasted probably a week. He did not throw up. That was the first time we had a different type of episode. And we don't know if it's because of his hormones or a trigger of his hormones changing, and also the stress of COVID and leaving school and all of that. So, but he was pretty much a calendar kid until we saw Dr. Bowles, and then we went 2 years.
That's great that he was able to go that long without an episode. Or did you have something to add, Wyatt?
No.
All right. What would you like? Oh, wait, let me ask this one first. I'm sorry. If there was one CVS symptom you could get rid of, what would it be?
Abdominal pain.
Abdominal pain.
Well,
And what would you like people to know about living with CBS that don't understand it? So think of someone that, those people when you tell them you have cyclic vomiting syndrome and they kind of look at you like, you have what? What do you want those people to know about living with CBS?
Mostly, wait, Mom, is yeah, so because it's so there's this one, so sometime all the time when I so since I had it, I can't really exercise as much. I get tired really quickly, and so
that's a tough one for Wyatt. He has a really active brother, and who's 2 years younger, and then there's Wyatt, and they love to play tennis and baseball and are very, very active boys. But Wyatt, it definitely gets triggered from his activity levels. He's unable to run for very long. We put him in a tennis camp once, and the first day, the heat, I think, and the exercise, he just was laid out. And I was so nervous about it, how it would affect him. But usually the summers are really hard unless we're at the pool. And the pool has been great for him because it keeps his body cool. But I think that's the hardest, is around his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Not being able to play like they do.
Yeah, and getting them to understand why, I'm sure is.
Yeah, Wyatt looks like a pretty normal kid.
I can't do, but I can, like, when I'm exercising, like I can do stuff better than other kids, but I just can't do it as long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I totally understand.
We actually were just a few weeks ago, we went to a friend's house in Pennsylvania, and they wanted to do a hike. And I love to hike, but I get nervous about Wyatt hiking. And so because Wyatt looks so normal and it's hard to explain cyclic vomiting syndrome to someone, and what your mitochondria cells do and your energy cells. So I tried to explain, this might be hard for Wyatt, but I was with my husband and another guy, and they both kind of pushed him and said, you can do it, be strong, be tough, go. And so Wyatt ran up the hill, and the next day we had an episode. So it's hard because if you don't see the episodes, it's hard to explain to people why he's unable to do regular activities.
Very true. What would you tell someone who's newly diagnosed, or they're hoping to get diagnosed, they think they have CVS? What would you tell them about having CVS?
If they really want to know what happens, I would say constant abdominal pain. You can't really be active as much, and you throw up a lot. And if they really don't want to know, I would pretty much say the same thing. Be harsh on kids.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, isn't it? You talked a little bit about the physical activity being impacted for Wyatt, but how else do you feel that CVS has impacted both Wyatt's life and really your life as a family?
You want to say anything to that?
Thank you. You go first.
Okay, so I tend to get stressed about our activities. So we took a cruise a couple years ago, but I was really nervous before we went. And the time on the boat, even though he was okay, I get nervous about any sort of change. So going on vacation anywhere, or I lived in Europe, I really want to take the kids back to Europe, but how would his body do and the time change, and so stuff like that I think is really, I'm constantly monitoring. I feel what he's eating. Is he getting nutritious food? But I think it's just our level of activity that's really hard. So not knowing, and I think for me, the anxiety is a huge one. Wyatt has actually taken it really well. I think Wyatt's a great example of someone who has been able to endure his pain, and he doesn't seem to really get down about it. I think it's harder for me. I have been really trying to work with my emotions. You're being silly now. I know. You're giving me bunny ears. I'm nervous about the phone call at work at the beginning of the school year that I usually get, which is Wyatt's complaining of stomach pain. He's in the nurse's office and I have to leave and go get him. And it's kind of the unexpected. When is it going to come? And it just makes it hard to kind of plan anything. And Wyatt, you need to sit down. But Wyatt, okay, sit down, Wyatt. But Wyatt seems to really have a really good attitude, even after he's done with his episodes. He doesn't dwell on them. I don't know if it's his age. He seemed to, kind of push through it. He doesn't feel sad about it. I don't know if that will change, as he grows up. We'll see. But it's harder, I think, a lot for his mom. So, Wyatt.
Wyatt, do you have anything to add about how CVS affects your life? No?
No?
Well, kind of that I get less days to do anything. Basically,
Yeah.
taking off a day of my life.
Yeah, taking off a day of your life. Yeah.
Kind of feels like it, doesn't it? Did CVSA help you with your CVS journey? And if so, how?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just joined. So I joined last month or this month, maybe. I saw a couple, I had received a couple of emails, and joined a video that you all had last month and was really, really helpful. I actually asked about how I should control my anxiety and my sadness when I see him in these episodes. It's very hard for me to function when he's sick, and got some great advice. So I'm really excited about being more involved and spreading the word about cyclic vomiting, which is why we wanted to share a little bit more. So.
Great. That's great. I'm glad you found us that way. If you could describe CVS with only one word, what would it be?
One word.
Horrible.
Do you have a different one word? What was that?
He said horrible.
I heard his. Did you say something else, Lisa?
I would just say unpredictable. Even though it's been predictable for us, it's still unpredictable. And that's hard.
That's not possible.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that either of you would like to share about CVS
What about you, Wyatt?
or about your journey with CVS?
No.
I would like to just share with the people who are newly diagnosed, and I would say there's some really great treatment that Wyatt's been able to get that's really, really helped him. That Dr. Bowles has been just a lifesaver. We're actually going to do the genetic testing for Wyatt. I think next week, actually. They just put the order in. But the medicine that we've had has really been helpful. And I know it's different for everyone, but medicine has been just a real blessing for our family and for him. It's turned, turned our lives, which really circled around cyclic vomiting, into being able to go a couple of years. And now this year, I think we've only had one episode. So we're doing okay right now. But I think the treatment that is available has been really helpful to us. 3 years of having Wyatt be undiagnosed was really, really painful, because I felt like the doctors really weren't listening to us. And I kept trying and going to the best doctors we could. We have great, my husband and I both have great jobs and we have great insurance. Wyatt, you need to come back. Okay. And I was still unable to find, and really some of the best doctors here in the DC area, and yet was still unable to get a diagnosis. So I would say, there seems to be some patterns with cyclic vomiting that I've read about with other people, and keep doing your best to find help.